Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is July 18th, a Saturday, a very hot Saturday, and we're back with more tweets from the past to review what happened in 2019. Of course, I can be found on Twitter at @RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Parler, Telegram, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy the content, please do hit like and subscribe. Tap the little bell below for notifications, and please do leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations. Intellectual dialogue, non-intellectual dialogue, trolling, I take it all. I love it all. Thank you so much. And of course, if you find my cadence to be on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. So, without further ado, let's get started with some tweets. Thank you for watching. So, we're going to start today with something a little lighter. I just realized I can make some random person across the office floor cough every time I cough. This discovery came with several moral questions, of course. One problem arose immediately. Coworkers began staring at me, and I know because I pretended to yawn and they yawned too. So this is kind of a little nostalgic, huh? We're all coming from quarantine right now. The coronavirus is out there in the air, or I'm not sure, around the country, around the world, different people are experiencing different things to do with masks, and herd immunity is happening here and there, and there's all kinds of stuff happening. I'm not an expert on epidemics. I'm not an epidemiologist, so definitely seek subject matter experts on this. But of course, it's been a long time since many of us have seen the office floor, including myself. I've been working from home during the lockdown here in Massachusetts. But of course, this talks a little bit about how we're a bit of a monkey see, monkey do species. So when I cough, I hear somebody else often right after me, they cough at work. It's almost like a compulsory thing for us to imitate and to reflect our environment and other humans around us. So you make them cough, essentially. They make you cough. But this discovery came with some moral questions, of course. When you're trying to do something that could be persuasive or hypnotic in some subliminal way, it's kind of a moral question. Well, should I do this thing? But this is a satirical tweet. The problem that arose is that coworkers began staring at me. I kept on coughing, and they kept on coughing back. I was enjoying the moment. I was running with it. And I knew they were staring at me because I pretended to yawn, and they yawned too. So this alludes to the idea that if somebody's watching, if you feel like somebody is looking at you and you sense that you're being watched, you might want to try yawning. If you yawn, that monkey see, monkey do effect might come in, and whoever was watching you will yawn too. So there's this little bit of a little trick you can play there. So, yeah, I pretended to yawn. I think I saw that one on Reddit. You can pretend to yawn. But, it's not about making them cough, of course. People aren't forced to do anything. I don't like this idea that there's stochastic talking, or this idea that people can organize other people based on how they act. Now, we do have this effect as human beings where one person does something and that shows everybody else. Like, for example, I'm making this video. If I can do it, then you can do it too, right? It kind of sets an example. And of course, going back to the corona talk, people say that, well, if the president wears a mask or if somebody does something, then it's going to influence a number of consenting adults to do the same thing. You know, as if that's people are so influenced by other adults. Now we are, but I feel like people kind of making an example. I think people overdo it. So just a fun tweet to start us off today. Onward and upward. So here's a pro tip. Don't be a reply guy or reply gal. Don't do anything that could bring you exposure, publicity, or promote your message or personality to a larger and like-minded audience. Don't run the risk of becoming popular. 15 minutes of fame? Nobody got time for that shit. So, this pro tip is kind of funny. It's kind of satirical. Don't be a reply guy or reply gal. So some people have different definitions for what a reply guy or a reply gal might be. This common definition would be that it's somebody that sort of simps or always replies or gets most of their exposure online through replying to somebody who's famous, popular, a celebrity, maybe a politician, or somebody that works in a field where they're very exposed to the media. And of course, if you put up a comment on, say, you know, President Trump's posts or any of these politicians or celebrities, if you go after Terry Crews, you'll get hundreds of. But of course, a reply guy or reply gal is usually somebody that does it for the same person again and again and again, and becomes sort of like a member of the posse, a member of the circle. Often, of course, the reply guy or reply gal will not be acknowledged by the person they are kind of, they're holding on to for dear 15 minutes of fame there. But I say here, don't do anything that could bring you exposure or publicity or promote your message or personality to a larger and like-minded audience. Don't do that. Don't be a reply guy or reply gal. Hey, someone could see your Twitter profile or your Parler profile, and they could, well, they might follow you. They might find that, hey, you're a like mind. You're somebody that I like the person you were replying to, the celebrity. And hey, maybe if I follow you, I'll get some more of that same kind of echo chamber dopamine. We all agree. I agree with you, and you agree with, well, Tim Pool or whoever it might be. Right? You don't want to do that, because that could give you exposure. That could expose you to a larger audience. You'd start to get followers, and you don't want to get followers. You don't want to get followers. That when people start to follow you, that means you're going to get a lot more. You might think it's all positive attention, but you're also going to get some negative attention. People are going to start to take you apart piece by piece, tweet by tweet. You don't want that. You don't want to be right on the cusp between love and hate. That would be, well, an undesirable place to be. This is about getting you away from being a reply guy or reply gal. We are providing a public service here on Jeff Tidwell's channel. So, don't do anything that could bring you publicity or promote your message or personality. Because if somebody has, say, 500,000 or 2 million or 5 million or 10 million followers, and you reply to them, you can go from having a 100 follower account to a 1,000 follower account. I mean, I think, what's his name? The Ramen Kid. Somebody can leave a comment below with who the Ramen Kid is. But there was a profile, there was a character that one meme, one reply, got him all the way from like about 80 followers to something like 16,000 or some crazy thing. One tweet, basically. And the ramen kid was all of a sudden a little bit famous. So, don't do it. Don't run the risk of becoming popular. Don't run the risk of becoming popular. It's a lot of hassle. You know what the paparazzi do, right? The paparazzi will come for you. If you're a reply guy or reply gal and you gain some fame from holding on to the coat strings of somebody else, hey, the paparazzi will come for you. Don't run the risk of becoming popular. 15 minutes of fame? Nobody got time for that shit. Nobody got time for that shit. Right? If you agree, leave me a comment below. Onward and upward. So here's a little bit. Han Solo did shoot first. Never let them take that away from you, because when that's gone, you know we're done. Han did shoot first. Never let them take that away from you, because once that's gone, that means we're done. Yes, the institutions, the establishment could take away your Han Solo shooting first in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Here's another quick one. I've been writing Tinder profiles for the homeless men of Denver, Colorado. Shits on the street, Svengali in the sheets. Hey, works even better in San Fran. Okay then. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about President Trump. Trump gives people nicknames. May people be affirmatively Trump positive or decidedly Trump negative, they use those nicknames. Love him or hate him, they use his framing. They promote his product. So, I'm not a persuasion expert, certainly seek subject matter experts on persuasion, but part of Trump's appeal is that he understands branding. He understands branding. In fact, he may understand it better than almost anybody else in the world. It's kind of his bread and butter, the thing he's known for and has been known for 40 or 50 years. Even his name, Trump, it's not their original name. Ask John Oliver. Ask John Oliver. Drumpf. It was originally Drumpf, but they rebranded to Trump because, well, Trump trumps Drumpf, right? It has this implication. He's the one to trump. He's the one to come out on top. Sort of sets him up for success in a way. A very subtle way. But he gives people nicknames, and may people be affirmatively Trump positive or decidedly Trump negative. So if people are anti-Trumpers or pro-Trumpers, it doesn't matter. They tend to use those nicknames. They tend to use the things he says. They tend to, you can find the linguistic blueprints, the linguistic, I should say, fingerprint, the linguistic fingerprint of Trump and other people on everything people say. So if you hear me use a term and I go, well, 2 movies on one screen, you go, oh, you listen to Scott Adams. You've heard Scott Adams. Or if someone says something like the lamestream media, I'm not sure if it was Trump or Styx Hexenhammer 666 that said that first, but there's certainly these linguistic fingerprints you can find. And guess what? I got linguistic fingerprints from Scott Adams. So you can find that. But people tend to use it. They spread the messaging. Doesn't matter if they love or hate him, if they think that he's incompetent, or if they think that he's a god, if they worship him as a bit of a false idol, the modern religion of celebrity, the intersection between that and the modern religion of institutions and state. Well, he's a bit of a state god because he's the president of the United States. People definitely go both ways. Or he's a complete idiot. The person that became the president is a total moron. He doesn't know how to read. He doesn't know how to speak. He doesn't know how to think. And he's very egotistical, and all he cares about is himself. And he's not humble at all. I think he once said, actually, Trump said, in 2016, he said, "I'm more humble than most people can understand." I'm sorry, Mr. President, but doesn't pass the fact checking. So people use those nicknames. They spread his messaging. They spread his frame. It doesn't matter if they love him or hate him. And it's kind of fun to watch. They're promoting the product too. They're mentioning him. Some people will talk to me about like, hey, why do you call attention to this thing here when you don't want people to like this, or you do? Well, why are you putting forward this? And I say, look, we share everything. We share everything. We don't need to do things based on persuasion. We don't have to do things based on what we want. Sometimes it's just funny to share something and to take in and to listen and to present different things from all sides of every political angle. I call it the political sphere. You don't have to necessarily, like I say, retweets aren't endorsements, shares aren't endorsements. Sometimes it's just fun to see something and to see what people's reaction might be. But people do promote things that they may not necessarily like. I remember actually, speaking of a coworker at the office, I actually remember when somebody was saying to me, I don't like Kim Kardashian. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about the Kardashians and Kanye West and all this stuff. I'm sick of hearing about it. And I'm like, then why did you bring it up? Right? You're continuing this talk. Now, I know, of course, people have every right to have an opinion about what's over the top, what's going too far. They have a right to complain. I love to complain. I'm like George Carlin, complaints and grievances. I love it. I love it. So I do support that, of course. But when somebody is complaining that you're talking about somebody too much and they're talking about that person, they brought them up in order to complain about them. It's a paradox. Or it's just a silly thing. So the more we use those nicknames that he provides, the more that we share his image and his face. Doesn't matter if we love Trump or hate Trump. The more we share him around, the more we look at him, the more we listen to him talk. May it be whatever subject. That's the thing about this Cunningham's Law effect. That, if somebody's wrong or if you think that somebody made a mistake, right? If one mistake from a 45-minute speech by anybody is put on to trending on Twitter and people just love this one part, imagine how many people that weren't going to watch that 45-minute speech that now will, because that one part, because they want to find something else. They want to find something else for to make fun of, to get dopamine, to get serotonin, hopefully not cortisol. And of course, oxytocin from sharing it and enjoying the smiles and the replies of the reply guys and the reply gals of other people. Connectivity. So that's that tweet. All right. So onward to the next tweet. And now we're going to get into a few heavier topics, or at least more philosophical and not so much funny, but we'll of course mix in satire as we do in every single one of my tweet videos. So here's the tweet. We have one language on this earth that all human beings understand, requiring no translation and communicating with the utmost transparency and efficacy. Numbers. Numbers that measure incentive, money, value, worth. When we talk in numbers, everyone can be on the same page. So, we have one language on this earth that all human beings understand, requiring no translation and communicating with the utmost transparency and efficacy, and that is numbers. How much do I have? How much do you have? Would you like some of what I have? Well, I have this amount of this thing, and you can have it, but you have to give me this much money. Or you have to give me something else in trade. You've got to give me perhaps an air conditioner. I could use 500 of your air conditioners, and that would mean a big deal for us. I don't happen to like your opinions on things. I don't happen to like your personality. I don't happen to like you. But if we make a big deal with lots of, say, air conditioners or whatever the product might be, the product or service, we can create a relationship. Yeah, we'll do trade. I have something you want, may it be a currency or perhaps something else we can barter, and you have something I want. So we have this incentive. If we buy a bigger number of your product, or if you buy a bigger number of our product, well, that means our future is looking pretty bright indeed. In fact, the stock market futures for us might be up because our partnership, we got together. We're a team. We're doing trade. There's an example of numbers. Because people have all kinds of, we have a tweet coming up later on about culture clash, but we have all these different cultures in the world. We have different people, different personalities, all these different characteristics of different people, their countries, their companies, their provinces, wherever their families, their friends, who they associate with, what they say on social media. There's all these different things that people have. And especially when you're dealing on a level of globally, with different nations, with different groups and different leaders, world leaders. Everybody can understand. And that's another thing about Trump, actually, that I think people don't recognize, and it's a very important part of persuasion. And the fact that Trump speaks in such a simple, he lowers his vocabulary to such a simple level that even a fifth grader or a sixth grader can understand. Well, what do you think that does for the translators? The translators that have to have to or want to, or they're obligated to translate what the president of the United States is saying to over 200 languages, whatever the number might be that get commonly used. All these different languages. When the language is so broad and so simplified, it's easier to translate. So it's harder to misconstrue. It's very clear. It may be simple, but it's very clear. Numbers have the same effect, where everyone gets the number. Well, we upped our production by 100%, by 500%. Oh, our revenue is down by 50%, and that applies to all countries. There's no translation really required. The math checks out, the spreadsheets check out. Math is the universal language. So when you start talking in math instead of talking in other cultural bits and other things that people, may not have in common, there may be some differences that are just, you might be a world leader, you go to another country, you sit down with that other leader, and in their leadership, you work out a deal. And all that matters is the numbers. Like, well, I want, if you're doing it between two families, well, I want 50 sheep. Okay. Well, those sheep cost, X amount. Let's go back 500,000 years. Those 50 sheep, well, if you trade me, let's see. Sheep for horses. Sheep for horses. I'd like 10 horses for your 50 sheep. Yeah. We could do that trade. We could do that little bartering, right? So it becomes this idea of like, well, this is the amount. This is the number of things we're going to be transferring. We're going to be very transactional. We're going to transfer this much there. There's no question of like, oh, well, what did your wife say about my religion? There's nothing like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We don't have to get to that level. It's all about the numbers. The numbers look good. Is this bartering or trade equitable? That's the idea here, that you want to communicate with transparency and efficacy. Numbers that measure incentive. We can say, well, if you make a deal with our country or family, we will go ahead and we will do this. We'll incentivize you more and more. It's a systems-based way of doing things. It doesn't go into any sort of fluff. The numbers are all that matter. The data is what matters. Money, value, and worth are all measured by numbers. They're not measured by, words per se. Words can certainly help describe something. Throw an adjective on something, you're in good shape. But these numbers, this universal language, and we have to be careful that money, we don't do too much inflation, that money, we don't manipulate currency too much, so that money still has value. But of course, money, value, and worth measured by numbers. It doesn't matter what the linguistic quality of things is, what everything else is. It matters that the numbers they're there. We might be speaking two completely different languages. We don't know anything about anything but what we're saying. About what we're saying, we don't know the words between us, the two of us. But we know the numbers. We know the numbers. We see the numbers. Oh, 95%. Okay. That's kind of the aim of this tweet. When we talk in numbers, everyone can be on the same page. So it doesn't matter that we don't speak the same language in terms of words, as long as the numbers look good. Just checking the replies here. Mr. Big says, yes, and the universal language of money is silver and gold. The word for silver and money are the same in half of the world's languages. Silver literally is money. And Jeff Tidwell responded, I'm happy you were able to self-actualize with my material. You've helped me reach one of my stretch goals. Thank you, Mr. Big. I appreciate your musical prowess. on to the next tweet. Thank you for watching. Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders. Who's Bernie Sanders? I'd like to say very respectfully, I heard today that Congressman John Lewis passed away. Rest in peace, John Lewis. Thank you, a civil rights icon, and we really appreciate what you've done. I believe it might have been cancer. Very tragic. So rest in peace, John Lewis. Back in December of 2019, I repeatedly said that Joe Biden would be the Democratic nominee. There were definitely certain people were definitely conflicted about whether Joe would make it or not. And we know what happened back right around the time everybody dropped out at the same time. Buttigieg and not Warren. Warren stayed in. But Buttigieg, of course, dropped out right before Super Tuesday, as well as, I believe, Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar. Who are these people, you might ask? But they were in the Democratic race. I was even in the Democratic race for a little while with my VP, Joe Sestak. That's right, Jeff Tidwell was running for president with the Democratic Party. And, well, I look forward to the convention, everybody. Didn't get any votes, per se. I haven't checked the numbers. Numbers are, like I said in the last tweet, what matter the most. But I don't believe I necessarily got too many votes. I might have been, but I did get more than Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, and Marianne Williamson. So, very important, very important. It's going to be a brokered convention, folks. Get ready. Get ready for Jeff Tidwell and Joe Sestak. Well, that's it. I'm going collectivist. I'm going to only interact with people named Jeff for the foreseeable future. And, Karen. Just looking through some tweets here from 2019, and I saw something on free speech. Definitely check out my new video, What is Free Speech, on BitChute and YouTube. It's a wonderful 14-minute video that kind of summarizes a lot about what I think, what my view is on free speech. Of course, as soon as you start to dictate what is free speech, what is it, you sort of slip into this sort of authoritarian position on what it is. You've defined it, you've dictated what free speech is. Naturally, that's a bit of an authoritarian position, not very libertarian, and normally when people talk a lot about free speech, they want it to be libertarian. But of course, as I said earlier today on Twitter, libertarian is one of those labels that I see more often used as a bit of a cudgel than anything actually productive. It's more used as a purity test to hang over your head. Are you a libertarian? Are you a libertarian? No, you're not. You're a statist. You're an anarchist. You're a minarchist. You're not quite libertarian. You're more of a neoliberal. You're more of a liberal than a libertarian. Or you're more of a conservative. You're not a libertarian. And then the libertarians are going after each other. Libertarians are saying, you're not libertarian enough. You're not preaching the non-aggression principle quite enough. Or maybe you have the wrong view on abortion. You have the wrong view on abortion. Because libertarians have a couple different viewpoints on that. There's the liberty of the mother in abortion. If somebody says, well, I have the right, I have pro-choice, and I am pro-choice, I have the right to do what I want. It is my body, my choice. Fair. But then you actually have the child's life. The child doesn't have that liberty. And the only way you can get around that lack of libertarianism for the child is to say it's not a child. It's not a child. It's just a clump of cells. You have to set the goalposts. Me, I'm pro-choice, but I see it as a morally questionable position, which is to say that I do believe life begins at conception. So it would be, by default, murder to go ahead and end that life. But at the same time, I do understand the pragmatic impact. If a child is going to be brought up in a home that cannot care for that child, if the parent is 14 years old, or if there's some reason why that child is going to have a terrible life, if they stick around with, if they stick around, period, I can understand how people could make the argument. But in reality, I do agree with the statement that it's more libertarian to let the child live, but at the same time, it's not as practical. I think that the mother should, I still err on the side of pro-choice. And some would say men shouldn't even be talking about abortion or feminism or any of these things. There's certain areas that a white male, a straight, non-Christian white male might say, I'm agnostic, of course. They might say that you're not able to talk about it. And I'm like, well, here, I'm with Dave Chappelle on this. I'm with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle says, hey, I'm pro-choice. But as long as, I should have a say if I'm going to be paying for this child to survive, if I'm going to be the benefactor, the father, and I'm going to be part of his life, I should have a say in that. And I agree there. I think that, it should be the woman's choice, but a man should be able to, opt out, essentially, of paying for things if they don't want to. So it's a complicated issue. I do think that people set the goalpost. They set the goalpost to the child as a clump of cells. They're not really a child. And then they go crazy and hog wild for abortion, which I think might be a little extreme. So just a little touch on abortion there. But free speech, of course, again, we've been talking a lot about free speech lately. We have this talk about free speech because people are being deplatformed, depersoned, and the question is, can Nick Cannon say totally anti-white or maybe even anti-Semitic things? But there's that question. It's like the line of love and hate, like we discussed earlier. We don't even know if he's talking about either this or that. Like, what's the line? Cancel culture. I don't believe in cancel culture. It's been around for much longer than the past year. It's been around, propagated and promoted by the right wing many years ago. The evangelical Christians did cancel culture, and they had a moral panic. Of course, moral panic is a modern religion. They had the moral panic of, heavy metal music and video games, violent video games are killing our kids, and all these different things. I'll be getting to another topic that might piss off the Christians in a little bit. But they had all that stuff, and now it's the left. Now it's the Democrat left. People hate when I use these broad terms, left and right. But the left is the one right now that's pushing cancel culture. They're saying, well, if you're not PC enough, you're not PC enough, and you're not this or you're not that, or you support the president, you support President Trump. He's Hitler. Orange Man Hitler. Orange Man Hitler. They do that. And they say, well, you know, we're not just going to stop. We're not going to just boycott you or boycott you, the opposite. We're going to just try to get you completely removed from all the platforms. We're going to report you to the credit card companies. We're going to deplatform you, deperson you, debank you. I do have a video out. Deplatforming, depersoning, debanking. Deplorable. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube. I talk a little bit more about that. Disincentivizing, all these different things, but that's the video. They're doing more. They're going above and beyond. They're really trying to ruin the lives and careers, and some of them even go ahead and dox. Now again, none of this is exclusive to any political side or faction. But right now it's happening on the left. It's their thing to try to push out any dissenting opinion. And I don't think it's necessarily out of any kind of ignorance. I don't think it's any kind of ignorance. I think it's a power play. I think they understand that if voices are out there, influential, persuasive voices, well, you know, anything they can do to silence them. Because there's always this understanding. I don't want to get into third-person effect. I can't read minds. No one can read minds unless we have Neuralink by Elon Musk. But there's this idea that because the assumption is that the right wing will do anything, any radical thing for power. They have no scruples. So if you go in with that mentality that they have no scruples, then over here, whatever side this might be of whatever you're discussing, whatever dichotomy, false or otherwise, but in this case it's the left, they assume, well, they would do it to us. And the fact is that conservatives are weak on a lot of stuff. They don't know when to fight back. They don't know when to fight back. They don't have the scruples to do it all. Some of them do. I say thinking in absolutes is a fool's errand, but speaking in them can be quite fun. Just for an example. So cancel culture is over here on the left right now. But of course, moralism and all these things run in cycles, so before long, and you're already seeing it, that the right's going, hey, why don't we start to try to cancel the left? Yeah, let's get rid of them. And I'm like, all you people are doing, doesn't matter what your opinions are, your positions or your opinions, doesn't matter. All you're doing is destroying shit, you're ruining dialogue, you're making it so that I have to, we have to be very careful about, when we're trying to meet somebody or talk to somebody at a party or we're doing this, we have to be very careful, unless we're totally based, unless we don't care, unless we're actually strong, we have to be very careful about, well, this got canceled and now there's this big campaign against this and I want to make sure that everyone understands that I'm blah, blah, blah. We got this minefield of everyone just canceling each other. It's like that, like I said before in a past video. You fight fire with fire, eventually everything ends up on fire. So I don't think we should be canceling so many people. On to the next tweet. Don't cancel Jeff Tidwell. So here is another fun little tweet that's very, very simple. In fact, it's called JPG.jpg. What is JPG? Well, it's not JPEG, the compressed image format for Mac and PC and everything else. But JPG is a very basic societal system that I, Jeff Tidwell, have concocted. It's called Jordan Pippin Guy. Jordan Pippin Guy. And this person, JPG, will tell you You are either a Jordan, a Pippen, or a Rodman. And you don't get to choose. Others choose for you. JPG, Jordan Pippen guy. So what this is about, this is very simple. I'll break it down quick. You're either the alpha, the Jordan, the best. And Michael Jordan, did you see The Last Dance? Watch The Last Dance on Netflix. Watch more Netflix. We're all locked down, right? Are we still locked down? Not for long, but while we're locked down, you want to watch The Last Dance. It was an amazing documentary about the 1998 Chicago Bulls, the final. They won 6 championships together, the finals. Check it out. You don't hear me use that word very often, right? Final. But they did it. They finally did it. And Michael Jordan was the best basketball player of all time. He is and was the best. Now Pippen, though, Pippen was almost equally good. Pippen was almost equally good. But Pippen couldn't be the ace of the team. No, Pippen actually settled into a beautiful role playing, well, I wouldn't call him necessarily this, but I'll say it anyway. Pippen was the beta, the top beta that rose to, well, essentially a soft alpha status. He never really led the charge. There can only be one. Like Highlander, Michael Jordan, there can only be one. There can only be one. But Pippen was a very close number 2. And perhaps could have been number 1 if Michael weren't there. And back in college, Pippen was one of the best players, one of the number 1. He was the leader. But with Michael around, beyond alpha, the alpha beyond alpha, you have that. You have Michael Jordan. Pippen worked so well, complimented Michael so well that I hold him in equal regard. But you have to know your place in the basic societal system called Jordan Pippen guy. But if you're not a Jordan or a Pippen, you might be a Rodman. And there's nothing wrong or right with being a Jordan, a Pippen, or a Rodman. But Rodman is sort of, well, he's not the leader of the pack, and he's not the number 2. He's not the first officer like Commander Riker on Star Trek The Next Generation. No, Rodman is more of, well, he's a third wheel, but he's a very important third wheel. And the reason is that, well, he's the glue. He's the X factor, the extra little bit that holds the whole thing together. You have your leader of the pack. You got Michael Jordan. And then you got Scottie Pippen. Without Scottie, Michael would never have won his 6 championships. But then you have Rodman, rebound leader, stealing the ball, throwing uncertainty into the mix, unpredictable. He might not even show up for practice. Dennis Rodman, does it all. He can shoot a 3-pointer out of nowhere. The last person you'd expect it. So Rodman's important too. You might be a Rodman. He's a little bit like, he's like Raphael, the archetype. We're doing like an archetypal game here. He's the Raphael from Ninja Turtles. But you don't get to choose if you're a Jordan, a Pippen, or a Rodman. Others choose for you. So it's kind of funny. It's just a satirical tweet, but I figured I'd share that. JPG. Two more tweets for you today. Maybe more, but we'll start with 2. Jeff Tidwell, back on December 27th, 2019, said, "Don't be shocked if Joe Biden soaks up the majority of the primary voters over 45 years old or so. and dramatically loses the under 45 vote to an assortment of 7 or so other people led by Bernie Sanders. Who's Bernie Sanders? Joe doesn't necessarily need to crack 30% to win this primary. He ended up cracking 30% when everybody else dropped out at the same time so that Joe would have a clear, uncontested run up to the convention. But don't forget, Jeff Tidwell and Joe Sestak are in this to win this. Check out my video on BitChute. For every point, a counterpoint. I think sometimes people tend to think that because I'm framing things a certain way, or that I'm advocating or persuading in a specific direction, that there might be like a bit of a binary thinking thing going on. But I like to say for every point there is a counterpoint. There's always another side to the argument. It might not be the better side. It might be worse. Maybe you want to stick to this side of the argument. But there's always another counterpoint over there, and then a counterpoint to that counterpoint, and a counterpoint to that counterpoint. Point, counterpoint for everything. And that video kind of talks a little bit about that. And that leads us into our next tweet. It's a named tweet. It's called Counterculture Clash. So let's read it. Let's break it down. Counterculture clash. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. Positive, negative, everything in between. There is a counterculture for every culture, and for every counterculture, a counterculture, and there is always more. There always will be another counterculture for every counterculture. Plan your trip accordingly. So counterculture clash. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. So of course, everyone knows by now. Everyone knows by now that when you censor something, when you remove it from the public square, the modern public square that I call the internet, with all these post-governmental entities and agencies like Twitter and Facebook, and Google, Amazon, these are bigger than many governments. They're more influential and all these different things than many of these smaller countries and governments. But we do this thing on the public square where it's the Barbara Streisand effect. The Streisand effect. When you go ahead and remove something or say something is taboo, it's human nature for us to go after it and say, well, we want to experience it. Now it has value. It has a value it didn't have before. Save that tweet. Save that tweet. Save everything. Really, archive everything. It's the way to go. Actually, Stick, Sex, and Hammer has this thing called I think it's called the Archive Everything movement. Every time you see something online that you believe should be preserved and you think maybe censored, maybe, there'll be a censorship and it'll get countercultural attention. Definitely archive as much as you can. Save videos, and that way people from the future will understand what's going on. Because I feel like, one reason we do these tweet videos time delayed, like I cut the segments up months after the video is recorded, and I also go back to the past, and this will be our last video for 2019. It's July 2020. We go back to the past to find a greater context for everything that's going on. It gives you an idea that where my mind was when I was writing this, and then of course the further delay of where my mind is when reading it. And then, like going back to these tweets here is interesting, but even going back to videos from early April, March, where COVID was just coming into effect in terms of America in terms of becoming part of our lives for realsies. It's interesting to see my demeanor back then and how I was approaching it. My approach hasn't changed that much, but in general, it's a window to a time that we maybe didn't necessarily experience. I say that, like, there's things that happen in politics, especially like the day by day. You can't even remember what happened 2 weeks ago. Sometimes you can't remember what happened. So imagine someone coming in like 2022, and then you say, well, there was a Twitter hack in July 2020, and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Kanye West and all these people had their accounts hacked. And then there was a DDoS on Cloudflare the next day. Nobody's going to know that unless they were here to experience it. That's not going to be reported. Like, that's not going to be renewed and reviewed years from now unless we save it and talk about it. These moments pass and then they're gone. They become hearsay. It's all about timing. It's about timing. When you're talking about false flags, it's about timing. You look at like situations like, oh, the timing was perfect. You had to be there. You had to be there. Sometimes you really have to be there. And so, like, I feel like we miss it, and that's why the videos get time delayed, so that there is this moment caught. This moment, everything's timed out, and I've found some very interesting things happen. But back to the tweet. When you censor something, countercultural attention is drawn to it. Positive, negative, and everything in between. So, right. It's the Streisand effect. When things are censored or removed, or there's a big hullabaloo about it, a big to-do about this one thing, more people are going to look at it. Okay? If you had just let it go and let it do its thing, sure, it would have gotten a lot of publicity as well. But getting rid of it, you get this effect. The counterculture to that culture will, of course, find something of value, of worth with it, positive, negative, or anything in between. There is a counterculture for every culture, and for every counterculture, a counterculture, and there always will be. Plan your trip accordingly. So that's right. And this goes into a little bit of a broader area here when we talk about the counterculture for every culture. So we have this thing called mainstream culture. It's the one that most people subscribe to in any given country or area of the world. It's the general consensus, the mainstream. And then you have a counterculture to that. There's always something bubbling up, sort of the dissenters, like the Gab app, Dissenter. It lets you comment on any URL online. Check it out. Gab.com. But you have dissent. There's got to be light so there can be dark. There's got to be dark so there can be light. So there's always these two things. For every point, a counterpoint. For every culture, a counterculture. There's more and more of this. The thing is, though, for every counterculture, there's also another movement that's contrary to that. It's another counterculture. So for every counterculture, a counterculture. It's another movement. And so we have this back and forth. And of course, the energy dissipates over time. You know, there can only be so much pushback from this to that and from that to this. I mean, I'm speaking very broadly and generally here. But you have these and you can surely leave a comment below with your examples of countercultural. But there is this thing. So you start off, well, usually it's the mainstream culture at the moment. It might be liberal, it might be conservative, whatever the decade or era is that you're dealing with. You have a culture. In the 60s, it was this sort of, the 50s had the nuclear family and the baby boom, and you had all this stuff going on that was America, Americana, manufacturing was up, all these things were happening, post-World War II, all this stuff happened, and then we were going into the Korean War, we had Vietnam, we had all this stuff, and then you have the counterculture. Counterculture was growing in the 60s. You had the Summer of Love, you had the beatnik movement, you had all this different stuff that sort of, critiqued and was a juxtaposition, was a counterpoint to the mainstream culture, the current culture of the time. And of course, there's always a backlash against everything. For every culture, there's a counterculture. There's always a backlash culture. So people start to actually, they start to build a community around their dislike of something or their opposition to something. People have been saying a lot. So I believe, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I believe that the 2020 U.S. presidential election is a referendum on identity politics. But there's a couple of different things going on here. We are seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, the identitarianism. We are seeing from multiple angles there, but you're seeing it now. You're seeing that we had an American culture, and then critical race theory in the modern religion of social justice came in, and third wave and fourth wave feminism, and how people are oppressed or they're institutional, systemic. I don't have to add the words. Not that I'm afraid of YouTube censoring, because we have a video out, how to solve racism in 2 minutes. Check it out on YouTube. But we have these different sides. And then, of course, because the Democrats push IDPol, social Marxism, intersectionality, the modern religion of social justice, they push it so hard that the Republicans have to do it too. Now, Trump has been trying to use identity politics in a nationalistic sense. He's been trying to go, hey, you're American. I don't care what color, race, creed, gender. I don't care what your pronouns are. You're an American. You're an American. He's done that, but then you kind of have to go, well, they're calling me a racist every day, so here's an African American statistic. Numbers are all that matter, right? Unemployment numbers were down, of course, because of COVID. They're back up, but he's had to do this sort of well, we care about Hispanics, we care about everybody. They never said they care about whites because it's a white majority country, and nobody can say anything good about whites because it's social justice. They're the oppressor. They're the majority. You're being oppressed. You are a victim. Remember, check out my video, Infantilization Engine, for more on how you're a victim. You are a victim. It's very helpful, very productive to think in that frame. So definitely check that video out. But this election is a referendum, and I think that a lot of what you're seeing now, and I am part of this movement, we have this programming of social justice and in identity politics. But then you have the counterculture to that, which is people like me that keep on saying things like, we are to be judged by the content of our character, not our immutable characteristics. Like Gad Sad says, the sad truth on YouTube. Shout out to Gad Sad. But we have this counterculture that we have formed, in which we just counter-program against the programming, the code. We are the counter code. We are saying, no. We want to be seen as Americans. We want to be seen as the French, the Chinese. We want to be seen as the country. We want to move to this format of every country for itself. We'll work together, but it's a nationalistic America first, Canada first, Mexico first. That's the system we're going for. Egypt first. Russia first. Russia. Ooh. Russia. Ukraine first. Wait a second. What was Ukraine? I don't even remember. If you remember why I made a Ukraine reference, leave a comment below. Yeah, I don't even remember. Anyway, there is a counterculture for every culture. And for every counterculture, a counterculture. And there always will be. Get ready. Because every time there's a movement, there's a counter movement. It might be smaller. Sometimes it's bigger. But, hey, you never know. You never know what you're going to find out there, depending on how persuasive or influential somebody or something is. And, yeah, I like to just kind of watch. I take part, too, of course, in the counter-programming against the identitarianism. We preach anti-identitarianism on this channel, but again, I'm sure you could find a contradiction somewhere in there, depending on the context you're observing. But yeah, I say plan your trip accordingly. Get ready. It ain't going to be simple. There's going to be backlash. There's going to be backlash. One more tweet for you today. We'll do two more tweets. We'll do two more tweets because I wanted to mug for the camera one more time like this. See, like that? Okay. We'll start. Well, actually, hold on a second. Hold on a second. There were two more tweets. But when you watch these tweet videos, you get warts and all. You'll see shorter edited videos on Twitter, as well as my segments here on BitChute and YouTube that cut it down and label what you're watching. But with tweet, you get something unpredictable. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm watching or going to say. Some tweets are reviewed, usually a couple are reviewed, and others are searched for live. So while the videos may occasionally be rambling or not make as much sense as I'd like them to, they are done off the top of my head. For the most part, there are a few little bits here and there that are not. I did have a tweet ready to go, but I think that I needed to look it up again. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Tweet. I hope you're enjoying the ASMR of my keyboard typing. Found it. Okay. So, on with the video. I found what I was looking for. Thank you. This is a named tweet. It's called Quantum Erased. Quantum Erased. Turns out, quantum mechanics was created by Albert Einstein in 1913 at the plateau of a trip he later described as atomic. Einstein viewed quantum as metaphysical hogwash, but said it may prove beneficial in sustaining public interest in physics over time. So this is a satire tweet, but it has some funny bits to it and some interesting thoughts to it. Because quantum mechanics, while I believe, personally, I do have the faith. I have reason, but I have faith. Mostly faith, because I'm not a scientist. I'm only an amateur social scientist, which abbreviates to ASS, or ASS. But I'm not a scientist. If you're a scientist that understands quantum mechanics and quantum physics, please leave a comment below with your thoughts and observations. But here we're talking about quantum mechanics being created by Albert Einstein at the plateau of a trip he later described as atomic. An atomic trip. Wow. So Einstein was baked. Einstein was baked, you guys. Maybe on acid, maybe on weed, maybe on LSD. Are LSD and acid the same thing? I don't know. So he made up quantum mechanics, calling it metaphysical hogwash. Einstein called quantum metaphysical hogwash, but said it may prove beneficial in sustaining a public interest in physics over time. So, I believe in quantum. I believe. But some people have also said things like, well, if two observers looking at, at one thing from different viewpoints, like everybody's singular purview on the world through their eyes, they see different this thing from two different angles, and that the light reflects differently, and in essence trying to measure it, the idea of Schrodinger's cat, the quantum experiment where you have a box and you say the cat is in the box, you put some poison in, and then the cat is neither alive nor dead until you check on it. So until you observe something in quantum, until you observe it, it doesn't necessarily exist in any concrete way, but then it kind of comes down on that concrete way, like a waveform collapses. You'll have to look up more in quantum. But the idea that it was that if quantum were fake, I don't believe it is, but if it were just a thought experiment, was quantum created to create this question that would be asked again and again by physicists and the public forever? Is it this idea that and of course people will have information that contradicts that, and there will be science that contradicts that. Therefore, I tend to believe in quantum, but I don't have the knowledge or the experience to make a judgment myself in any credible way. So, but it's funny to think of it that he might have thought of it as bullshit, but wanted it to be out there for optics and for intrigue and for persuasion. Yeah, you want to get into physics. Don't you want to solve those quantum questions? Don't you want to find the square root of pi? Don't you want to figure out if we're in a simulation or not? Of course you do. You want to get into physics. You need to be interested. You need to get your interest level up. So, just a little fun aside before I go into my final tweet of the day, which is going to end up being probably my most controversial. That was the one I was looking for just now. Quantum erased. Anything else on this? He plateaued on a trip, calling it atomic. Yeah, I can't give you a reference point. I'm not a subject matter expert on quantum or physics, so if you have any thoughts on this satirical tweet below, please do leave them. Okay, onward and upward to our final tweet for the day. So this one here is interesting. Now, I have a number of tweets out there. If you do a search on Twitter, @RealJeffTidwell, and then put in my position on, and then some important issue, maybe political or social or scientific or whatever it might be. For example, my position on free speech or my position on immigration. But here we're going to do My position on pornography. My position on pornography is that it is a form of expression and that it should not be banned on a universal level. There are positive/negative consequences of masturbation and consuming pornographic content. And there are contexts in which either are healthy or unhealthy on a subjective basis. So this week could have been titled Fence Sitting 101, but I'll come down a little harder on some of these positions right here on Jeff Tidwell's channel. So, pornography is, people can look at different forms of literature and say, well, this has pornographic content, this has something that may, so the term pornography in itself is subjective. But they might find that this literature has pornographic content, it has sexually suggestive or content that may, rile up that energy. We'll call it the energy. Children do view this channel, but I say swears like fuck, and maybe they shouldn't. This might be 13 plus, PG-13 channel. But so far, no banning from YouTube. But, some things are, so porn is subjective as it is, and it's a form of expression. There are people that do things like they nude model, or they write things that, they might even be humorous things. There's porn humor, there's porn everything. In fact, everyone knows that the first thing that happens when new technology is introduced is porn finds its way to the technology. Virtual reality. As soon as smell-o-vision comes in, you know what's next, right? Or Neuralink, or any of these technologies. Once we figure out quantum mechanics, like on Star Trek, we start having quantum computers, the first thing they're going to process, right? That's right. Porn. P-R-0-N. So it's a form of expression, and it should not be banned on a universal level. I think there is a large consensus of people, and many of them I agree with on other topics. I have friends, I have family, I have many people in my life that say porn is just not good. It's not good. It hurts families. It hurts relationships. It hurts our own incentive. These are all true. It can hurt all these things. It can mislead children. It can expose children to suggestive content that they can find on the internet. It's not protected enough. Children can go push past parental protection and just find pornography online. It's dangerous. It also gives men and women a false preconception or presupposition or preconception of what sex is, what intimacy is, what romance is. It takes people away from God. It takes people away from meaning and purpose because, we have this thing called the biological incentive. I'm going to go through all the sort of negatives first. We have this thing called the facts really, biological incentive. So you might find that, if you start the day by looking at pornography and masturbating, you might not have much purpose because our purpose is to reproduce. I know we have all this other stuff we do. We make these wonderful videos. It's great. It's fun. Dopamine flows, the serotonin. I get a lot of oxytocin every time you leave a comment below. But it's, at the end of the day, we are mammals. We are creatures. We reproduce. We are survivalists. And so we get this little hit of, we call it an orgasm. when we actually enjoy this moment of release, we are incentivized to do it again and again and again, so we end up having over 7 billion people on Earth. And I get how porn definitely undermines that, because you're replacing a real person that you love and care about. You're replacing someone that you're supposed to work, you're supposed to work on your communication. You work on your love and your relationship and your connection. You're supposed to work on your sex life. You gotta work on your sex life, folks. Jeff Tidwell says, work on your sex life. Right? But this is general advice you'll get from any mindset guru, anybody else. There are positive and negative consequences of masturbation and consuming pornographic content. Like I said. Now, people might go, okay, you've named all these things, so why would you ever allow people to do this? Choice and inertia, human nature, banning it on a universal level. I get the idea. It's a great big ask. It's a great big ask. But you know it's coming back. You don't even need the Streisand effect for that. The first thing that happens when they figure out how to pull deleted hard drives out of the ether, when they figure out how to go quantum and reconstruct every hard drive that's ever been destroyed. When we unerase quantum is no longer erased, like in my tweet from before. The first thing they're going to do is go, how much porn was lost? Let's get it back. They'll do that. And I think that it's the parents' responsibility. It's the parents' responsibility, not the schools. Not the schools, which should open, by the way. Not the schools. It's the parents' responsibility to teach their child about sex, sexual education. It's the parents' responsibility to make sure that they're monitoring and restricting what their child does on the internet. But I have to say, it's pretty hard to stop a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old nowadays, because they know more about the computer than you do. They're on Snapchat, they're on TikTok. They know more than we do. And I started with an Apple IIe when I was 3. These kids are growing up with an iPad in their hands. And naturally, they're going to think one day, I want to see naked men and women. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get that feeling. And we need your parents. We need you guys to be there. I'm not going to be a parent. I don't want kids. Pro-choice, don't want kids. Male feminist. Just kidding. But the parents must be responsible. Make sure that the children, teenagers understand what's going on. And pornography, I understand why you'd want to get rid of it. I understand why you'd want to get rid of it because of all these negative things. The way that it sort of pulls men and men, men and women, women and women, pulls people apart. It says, I don't need a relationship. I don't have to put up with all this emotional baggage. I can just go to my computer, look at this, do this, and I'm happy. That's not living. That's the slow slide and destruction of the human race. I get it. So I think it's one of those things where it's like everything in moderation. There are the positive and negative consequences of masturbation and consuming pornographic content, and contexts in which either are healthy or unhealthy on a subjective basis. If you make it a lifestyle, actually somebody asked me a question. I did put a tweet forward earlier this week, and somebody asked me, are furries degenerate? Are furries degenerate? Great question. Same general topic. I say whatever you do in the privacy of your bedroom is your business. Jeff Tidwell and Joe Sestak say so. 2020. Whatever you do in the privacy of your own home, as long as everyone is consenting, everybody is consenting. Child can't consent. So if you're a furry, hey, Jeff Tidwell doesn't care if you like to wear a bear suit and get fucked in the ass. That's your prerogative. I have nothing to do with that as long as you're... I'm a libertarian. I've labeled myself a libertarian. As long as you're in your own home and everyone's consenting as adults, go ahead. It's not degenerate. Have at it. So that answers that. So I think that there is a healthy application for pornography. I think that certain times it can certainly rev people up. But at the same time, you know, men and women, I think there's been studies out there that say that women view porn almost as much as men do, which is kind of surprising because men are more visual creatures. But people do say that it can give you problems with performing because eventually you start to get used to the pattern, the repeating pattern. Your body gets used to sitting in a chair or sitting on the couch, wherever you're sitting on the bed, and you're doing something the same way every time. I don't have to go into the terminology, but there's something called a death grip. I don't know if women have it, but I know men do. And people can run into these problems where they have trouble actually performing intimately because of pornography. So my position is more of, I guess you could call it libertarian, where I say, you know, don't get rid of it, don't get rid of it, don't censor it, maybe get it off of Twitter. I think it's kind of unfair that Twitter lets you have pornography everywhere, but then gets rid of somebody for saying white people good. You know what I mean? I think that there is definitely this idea that, you know, we could certainly control where it is. Pornhub, fine. You know, I think was it Sargon of Akkad? Somebody was talking about putting their actual video content, their like political videos and philosophical videos on Pornhub. For coverage, for more exposure and engagement. I thought that was pretty funny. But I don't like to demonize it. I don't like to demonize pornography. I think that, you know, I don't really want to speak too much, but we've all masturbated, of course. In a relationship, not in a relationship, it's not like, if you replace relationships with people on a screen fucking, especially a man watching another man all the time, it's always this sort of cuckery kind of thing, this cuck frame going on. If you're always looking at somebody else fucking and you're not doing it, yeah, this starts to form a bit of a health problem. Not just physiological health, but a sort of psychological, mental health situation where you've changed what you understand sex to be. And of course for young people it's not great because they start to get these ideas about what you're supposed to do. And a lot of people don't like to be pile drive for 60 minutes or 69 minutes like some of these videos. So I'm no expert, but I don't think it should be banned. I understand there's a moral question. I understand that, you know, Christians might not like it. There are people out there that may not like it. But I feel like it's inevitable. And the best we can do is to make sure that we have parental controls and parental talk. Have the talk about the birds and the bees with your child. You know, don't let them wander out into the wilderness. When you start to see when they start to ask the question, you know, hey, talk to your husband or wife or whoever it might be and say, look, you know, it's time to talk. It's time to explain this so that we don't have misconceptions and they don't start to look at porn and think that that's what intimacy and love and romance mean. So I figured I'd share that. It might be a little controversial, but I wanted to do something a little bit further out there. And that is actually the last tweet for today. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the content today. It's a little bit hot, and I had to do an edit earlier. You might have recalled. Very near the beginning of the video, I didn't edit, but no more edits after that. The rest of this is warts and all, and will be cut into future segments. So once again, thank you for making it this far. We're at the 1 hour and 30-minute mark. I appreciate your time, and if you enjoyed the content, please do leave a like below and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate your commentary. I'd like to have more dialogue with the viewers, especially on these more controversial topics. So definitely leave a comment below with your thoughts and observations. Downvote if you didn't like the content. Helps me with the algorithm. And of course, I can be found on Twitter at Real Jeff Tidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Parler, Telegram, and I have my art on Instagram. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you once again for watching. You guys are the winners. You guys are the winners. All of you out there in YouTube land and outside the window. Anyway, as I always say, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Perhaps the truth lies between. Some of what I said was wrong, and some of what I said was right. So, thank you very much for making it this far and watching the full video, and I hope to see you next time.